Welcome, guys. It's always a little bit daunting, the little countdown before the lives, and I'm always a little bit aware of not having anyone watching in the beginning. It always takes a little while for people to come on, for it to actually be a live, interactive thing. I'm running a little bit late today. I apologize if anyone was waiting. I updated my browsers on my computer, and it wouldn't. I need to give permission for Chrome to use the camera, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. So now I'm doing this from my phone, but that's all right. So today's topic's an interesting one. Hey Terry, hey Nex. Is that how I say your name? Welcome, guys. Hey Dylan, thanks for joining me today. So today I'm talking about the English language and how it's making us sick. And this is a very real statistic that actually, more than anything else, speaking English predisposes us to chronic disease. So I'm posing the question, is there something inherent in the English language that actually predisposes us to chronic disease and prevents us from healing from these things? Or is it just a coincidence that English-speaking countries tend to have more money and therefore access to more processed foods and to sedentary living and stuff like that? You'd think it would be the reverse, but it's not. So, hey Casey, welcome, man. The first thing I wanted to point out about the English language is that it's a very noun-based language. A lot of indigenous languages, and I learnt this recently from reading a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, which I'd highly recommend. In a lot of indigenous languages actually use verbs a lot more frequently, particularly for things like features of the natural environment, such as a waterfall or a bay or the wind. These are all verbs. They're all something that is being done or that is done. To be a bay, to be a waterfall. They view the world and themselves as a process, not as a solid thing. And it's this kind of thingness that gets us into trouble. This idea of things being fixed, including ourselves and our physical body being a fixed structure. And I see this all the time in people with chronic pain or chronic disease, that they start to refer to their pain as the pain, as if it's a thing separate from themselves, or the cancer, it being a thing, as opposed to it being a process. All disease is a process. All pain is a process. These are things that we're doing in some way, whether we're doing it consciously or unconsciously. It's a process, and ultimately, philosophically, everything is a process, really. Alan Watts talks about the ego and the confusion that we go through about ego and about the self, and we think we're like a rock, being a solid thing, when in fact we're more like a whirlpool. When you see a little whirlpool in a stream, it's still just the water. It's just doing something differently, but our brains categorize that as a whirlpool and label it and give it a noun, as opposed to it being a process of the creek or the stream. And likewise, when we have pain or disease or an infection or anything, it's a process of our body. It's not a noun. While cancerous cells, there is actually a physical structure there. It's the behavior of these cells and what they're doing differently that actually creates the dysfunction. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention, is this idea of illness being a noun versus it being a verb. Because language and the way we use language and the words we choose to use ultimately dictate the way that we see reality. And I think ultimately the way we see reality dictates our choices and our outcomes, particularly with health and disease. This is something that I'm constantly pushing to everybody that comes to see me professionally and to everyone that I talk with about health, is that we're responsible for ourselves. There's very little in the way of chronic disease that happens actually genetically. I think it's about, like 10% of stuff happens, 10% of genetic illnesses are actually truly genetic in nature and in the way that we don't have control over them. We learnt a few years ago, well, okay, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit here because I think I'm getting away with myself and I haven't kind of explained things enough. So first of all, I think that the way we use language dictates our beliefs and our reality. English language has been heavily influenced by Christianity, and Christianity is a religion that was developed in a very urban setting, and there are hallmarks of that urban setting in the beliefs of the Christian religion. So things like that the world was created by something, and therefore we were created by something or someone. The way that a carpenter would create a table or a potter would create a bowl or something. There are also very hierarchical structures in the Christian religion that come from an urban setting and from the hierarchy of having a king and lords and rulers and stuff within the environment that religion was originally created. So you compare that to naturalistic religions like Taoism or like Hinduism or like some of the animistic beliefs, such as the most indigenous cultures had shamanic beliefs and where everything has life. And I just mentioned before about indigenous cultures having very verb-like languages or verb-dominant languages, where even things that we would consider to be a noun and a solid thing are actually a verb. So if you went back a few thousand years, or even a couple of hundred years, pretty much everybody in Europe and everyone that spoke English believed that the world was created by a being who was very much like a king or a father, who created things the way that we would create things. Create a table or a chair or a bowl or a bottle or whatever. Going forward, science started to investigate, or science arose and started to investigate how the universe works. And originally, scientific thought had this idea that there was a process or a structure behind the universe that was put forth by God, and they were exploring that, and they eventually discovered, well, it doesn't matter if there's God or not, it doesn't matter if there is this creator or this father or king or whatever sitting in the clouds somewhere creating things, because it doesn't help us to create hypothesis, and it doesn't help our thought process in any way, and we can do without that belief. As things evolved, and in the last century we've seen quantum physics, we've moved on from the Newtonian physics where the world is just a machine to quantum physics. And even prior to that, with electron microscopes, they've seen that even when you're looking at matter, at the very smallest parts of matter, you just see an electron spinning around a proton and neutrons, which are basically just charges moving around each other. So even matter, a noun is a naming thing. So a noun is anything solid that has matter. But when we look at that matter, we see it's just energy behaving in a certain way. So even something that appears very solid is actually a verb. It's actually a process and something that happens, and so is all of life. And this causes a lot of problems for us for the way that we think, particularly with health and disease, for a few reasons. One, that we tend to think these processes are actual things, and we tend to be powerless against them. When you realize that this disease or illness or pain is a process that you are a part of, you're now stepping out of this victim mentality and into your power. You know, understanding that whatever you're experiencing, this will go for everything in life, not just disease and pain processes, but for everything. When you're acknowledging that you're a part of this process, you can start to exert influence on the outcome in some way. We can't do that when we're not acknowledging that we're a part of that and this thing is happening to us. It's very hard for the mind to see its way out of that. So English is very noun based. Hey Mike, thanks man. Shoot through any questions, guys. I kind of ramble a bit on these things, but I always have a few little points written out in front of me, but I very much just ramble. So if anyone wants to ask questions, ask away. Back to the Chinese. I mentioned naturalistic religions versus Christian religion. So our whole method of thinking, our whole worldview and the English language is based around very Christian, very urban beliefs. And they're very much, they like things to be a fixed entity so that you can own them, basically. The Western Christian mindset that dominates the world is very much about ownership and owning things. And you can't own something that's not a thing. So if you compare that to, so our idea of God is as a man or a father or a king, or even if it's a woman or a mother figure, it's still a being separate from ourselves, as opposed to this process that is life. In Chinese thought, in Taoist thought, the Tao is translated roughly into English as the way. So the Tao Te Ching, which is it's kind of like the equivalent of the Bible. It's the Taoist book of wisdom. Starts off by saying the Tao can't be described. It's beyond description, and if you can describe it, that's not it. But I'm going to go on and try my best to describe it. But basically, it's Tao can be translated roughly as the way. And the way is a process. Their idea of God is a process. It's a way of being and a way of life, and it is everything that is being. The Tao, they say about Taoism, it's that which cannot be departed from, and that which you name is not it, because it's greater than all that, because it's everything and etc. You have this idea of God. Or the Tao as a process that is all-encompassing and encompasses the whole universe. Alan Watts talks about this as, he says, we have this idea of, and again it comes from Christianity, this idea of creationism, where the universe was created by God in 7 days, and then it was as we know it to be, and we look around and we see all this, and that was God's creation. And then when we discovered about the Big Bang, kind of in our mindset, we thought, okay, so it wasn't actually God, or this God separate from us and from the world that created the world. It was this Big Bang, and prior to the Big Bang, there was a super atom, or unlimited potential in some way, shape, or form, that exploded into the universe. And then over billions of years, everything cooled, and now the universe is made, and here we are. When in fact, the Big Bang happened, and it's still happening. The universe is still expanding, and energy is still transforming into different shapes. We're still experiencing entropy, and we are that process. I am the universe as you are, and everything we know is the universe unfolding itself. So the question then becomes not whether there is a God, but I guess what is the nature of, or is the universe intelligent? And we know that the universe is at least as intelligent as you or me. So I believe in order for us to get healthy, we need to stop identifying so much with identifying processes as nouns and understanding the processes that we're going through, and understanding that pain and illness is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a sign that we're not completely on track, or that we're bumping up against some kind of universal laws or physiological laws. And when I say universal laws, I'm talking about, you know, very concrete things like gravity, you know, and less concrete things as well, I guess, like karma, that I believe in. So, hey Zane, hey Hells, welcome guys. Oop. So English being very noun based. The other thing, if you ever read any of Marshall Rosenberg's work, he developed nonviolent communication. And in that book, he talks about the fact that in the English language, g'day Gitas, hey Dave, welcome guys. Sorry, just noticing how many people are on here. Hey Carla, thanks for joining everybody. He speaks a lot about how in the English language, it's so incredibly difficult to actually take ounership for anything. You know, if you're feeling angry and someone cuts you off, or let's say your housemate leaves out their dirty dishes in the sink again, and you get up and you need to make breakfast and the sink's full of dirty dishes. You know, our natural inclination, or the easiest way to communicate that in English, is to say, you make me angry. You know, you leave your dishes in the thing all the time, you're making me angry. When that's actually not the case. Only we can make ourselves angry. It's a choice. We choose to be angry as a response to them leaving the dishes in there. The point is, it's very hard in English to actually take ownership for things, and it tends to create a lot of violence outside and inside. Anybody that has done any kind of inner work at all, any kind of self-development stuff, will have heard the idea of how we speak to ourselves. You know, and when you do something, you know, you don't like the outcome, oh fuck, I'm so stupid. Like, oh, you idiot, what did you do? And usually we speak to ourselves in the way, or it's said that we speak to ourselves the way that our parents spoke to us. I don't think that's completely true. I think it's that we speak to ourselves the way that we felt after our parents spoke to us in a certain way. But my point is, within the English language is almost this violence towards ourselves and other, and in order to actually express responsibility, to say, look, I feel angry when you leave your dishes in the thing because I need to wash up. I've only got half an hour to make breakfast and get to work, and when I have to clean all the dishes and stuff, it makes me late for work. So I feel angry when you do that. Could you in future please wash your dishes before you go to bed so the sink's not full of stuff? And it's this big, long, roundabout way of saying things. You know, it's a lot easier to say, it fucking pisses me off when you leave your dishes in there, you know. Yeah, it's a lot harder to speak in a non-violent way in English. So again, here's the English language. Does it make us sick, as I have questioned in the title here? I think in many ways it affects our mindset in a way that we need to be aware of, that when we change, we can probably achieve greater levels of health by having ownership over what it is we're feeling and what it is we're experiencing. And it's only when you have ownership of your disease or your pain or your problem with this person or whatever, that you're actually in a place to change it. Yeah, I think that's basically my point today. And I got this idea because I was listening to this thing, Braiding Sweetgrass, which is an awesome book. I recommend everyone read it or listen to it. I'm listening to the audio book. just about the processes of life and how ultimately everything is a process. And when we change a process and we give it a noun as a name, that we're fixing it. We're creating rigidity within this event. And when that's an illness, if it's pain or if it's disease or something like that, you don't want to have a rigid pain in your back or a rigid cancer. You want it to be a process, which it actually is, so that you can start taking steps to change it and not view it as something that you need to attack and go up against. You know, I'm talking about cancer treatment here and other kinds of treatment that really don't work with the body's own defenses, things that go against what your physiology is trying to do, and view this illness or this thing within you as something separate to yourself from yourself. So I guess my advice is honor the processes of life, honor the processes within yourself, even if it's pain or dysfunction or illness or something like that, because these are ultimately the greatest teachers. And it's only through these things really that we grow. It's only through challenge that we grow. And in this day and age, some of the biggest challenges we're going to face are going to be illnesses and challenges of health, because health of the human population is just declining so quickly for so many reasons. Yeah, thanks guys. I'm going to end it there. Trying to keep these things short and sweet. Hey Lindsay, thanks for joining. I'm just on my way out, but enjoy the rest of your day, guys. Beautiful weather out there, and I'll see you next time. Shoot through any questions. I will do my best to answer when I get a chance. Ciao.